Item E is the discussion and presentation of COAlign Group LLC report on possible general obligation bond and sales tax elections. Yes.
As Ms. Crown is walking up, I want to remind, about 6 weeks ago, council took action to enter into a contract with COAlign to look at or investigate a 3-phase approach to investigating sales tax and possibly a GO bond. So this is the first report after the first phase 1, which is to meet with stakeholders and do some initial evaluations. So I'll turn it over to that. To you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here this evening. I'm Kathy O'Connor with the COAlign Group. And as the city manager mentioned, we have been undertaking quite a few stakeholder interviews over the last 6 weeks. Probably have interviewed over 20 people at this point. And just as a reminder, what you asked me to look at was the possibility of the city issuing general obligation bonds to help fund capital improvement needs. And looking at that in the context of the 1 penny temporary sales tax that you have for operations that expires in 2027, and the half penny that you have for capital improvements that also expires in 2027. So when we talked with people, we tried to talk about it in that context and try to get their reactions to how to time all of these different initiatives and find a way to provide some more diversity and funding for capital improvements for the city. As some of you know, there has been a group in Edmond that has done some polling around some of the questions about capital improvements. The Alliance 2050 group has looked at it. One thing from that polling that we know is that the issue of street improvements and traffic issues are very important to people in Edmond and polled very well as far as additional funding to try to fix those kinds of problems. From the interviews that we conducted, there were several themes that emerged after giving people some background and talking with them about it. One of those was that there is, I would say, like 100% consensus that the city needs to look at the 1 penny for operations and making it permanent. That this idea of using a temporary sales tax to fund ongoing operations is really just not, frankly, very good financial management, and creates a risk for the city that really you could do without. So I think since that would not be a tax increase, I do think that that's something that you all should consider putting on the ballot and kind of getting that taken care of even well in advance of the 2027 expiration so that you know that that issue has been resolved. Obviously the other thing that we talked about was general obligation bonds. I would say that most of the people that we talked to, the broad majority of the people that I talked to were in support of some kind of additional funding, including general obligation bonds for especially street improvements and funding to help with traffic congestion, dangerous intersections, and some of the issues that Edmond is experiencing because of growth. I will say that there were concerns expressed by the school district that they saw the bond issue and the use of ad valorem taxes as kind of their domain and not the city's. But I do believe that that there are ways to possibly talk with them some more and try to at least get them to be more supportive of this idea of traffic improvements. Obviously, there were some concerns that the report goes on to talk a little bit more about street and traffic improvements. The other thing that came up is probably the need to improve communications and transparency around some of these issues. So I think that the Citizens Committee that you all have already created but haven't appointed the members to yet is a good way to address some of those concerns about transparency. Also, the requirement by state law that I think in my report I said 85% of the projects be listed. It's actually 75%. The 85% rule is an IRS regulation that I kind of got confused in my head. But 75% of the projects have to be specifically listed. and you vote on them by project type. So that really helps, I think, with people's feelings of accountability and transparency, that they'll know which projects they're voting for. The projects have to be very specifically listed by address. There's just lots of requirements around how those bond propositions are worded. So I do think that the use of that committee is going to be a really important part of this transparency issue. Some of my recommendations are that you consider calling an election to make the 1 penny sales tax permanent in either August of this year or November. My overall recommendation is that you call an election for November of 2024 for both the 1 penny sales tax for operations and a general obligation bond election. And there were some reasons behind that. I think, first of all, I think that 2024, with the general election, you're going to get a broader cross-section of voters that are coming to the ballot box. Obviously, the presidential election, we're going to have very high turnout. And because of that, you tend to get a broader set of perspectives on different issues. Obviously, somebody's going to have to run a campaign. That campaign is going to have to be well communicated and try to really appeal to Edmond and people who live in Edmond's desires to make this a really great community. And that is a theme that was very evident in the polling that the other group had done, that people feel very strongly about Edmond and Edmond as a community. I think that there's some other things that are out there. It's highly likely in 2025 that the city of Oklahoma City will also have a general obligation bond initiative. As it came up kind of in the meeting today, there's always some confusion about where people live, and you know, you can tell if you go and look at your trash cans, but people don't seem to understand that. You know, their GO bond authorization will probably be $1 billion this time. So trying to maybe get some distance between that might be a good idea. And while the school district had, you know, they have concerns, and I don't know that we can address all of their concerns. One of the things that they mentioned was that they would like to have some space and time between their bond election and any GO bond election the city might do. So if we can get it done in 2024, it puts, you know, over a year between their next school bond election. So, you know, some of the things that are even in my scope of work and that are talked about as next steps is this, you know, that convening the group, the citizens committee, appointing those members as quickly as possible, conducting several meetings with that group. Obviously, their job is to pick projects and to help identify, you know, the projects that are selected, and then working with either city PIO staff or an outside communications firm on the city's public information campaign, obviously along with whoever conducts a campaign outside of the city, if that's something that is undertaken. But the city can provide information to the public about the projects and about how general obligation bonds work, and I think that's something that's going to happen fairly quickly and to get organized around. So I think I have covered everything in my report. You know, obviously my scope of work has the next steps that talk about figuring out the structure of the bond issue and the sizing of the bond issue and all those kinds of things. But those are things that would happen next as we convene that citizens group and try to get a handle on what this might look like moving forward. So be glad to answer any questions or
Well, thank you for right now for all the preliminary legwork you've done, come up with this report. Still a lot of heavy lifting to do, go forward, like who would even, we would have the committee come together, but who would be actually run that campaign for us and all that discussion and all that, but that's what we're here for. Council, any other quick questions, comments? This was just a a presentation for us to discuss and hear, but there's no official action from us today, but it's any feedback to be taken.
I mean, I just feel thank you for that report. I feel very strongly that people move to Edmond for quality of life and that they're focused on education, transportation, recreation, and public safety. Today, we had the opportunity as our meeting started to recognize the great work that our first responders do, both our police and fire. And that's because citizens have agreed to dedicated funding sources. So regardless of the economic wins like we saw presented today at the beginning of our budget hearing, we know that police and fire will continue to be well supplied, well trained, and be able to respond appropriately. As we look at the number one issue that comes up on surveys, transportation, and recreation and other things that our citizens we know want to be invested in, I think putting the different levers that are available on the table and then asking what is it that you want to do. So if you have, for example, the Lake Arcadia Master Plan, which people love to recreate, it's great. It's got 3 phases. There's certain buckets that can be used, other buckets can't be, and it's having that conversation with the citizens about what type that you want. So, you know, I thought it was there. I was just looking at the city council where it has my bio and it says, goal, give Edmond voters the opportunity to vote up or down on dedicated funding to support the best transportation, education, recreation, public safety, and public savers for its residents. And I love that we're going to hopefully have that conversation and to be able to do that. So thank you for your work. We don't have all the answers now, but I think we know that our citizens are eager to see how they can support quality of life, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, and I'm not telling you all anything you don't already know, but the 1 penny tax, where 2/3 of it is going towards public safety, when you talk to people about that, they become, really focused on the need to maintain public safety funding in the community and not have that at risk, along with this, roads and transportation issues.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, as part of the next steps is we'll come back on May 28th to formally organize the structure for the GO Bond Committee, Citizens Committee. We'll talk about, how many each council member gets to select on that and that process. So, and then it'll be open for a period of time for application of that process. So that's, I'll call it the next formal action item will come to council to consider.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.